You're watching This Week in Louisiana Politics with Fred Childers.
Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Fred Childers. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. Early voting for the midterm election is done. Experts say it's one for the record books, with more than 300,000 voters taking advantage of early voting. Typically, midterm elections don't attract the enthusiasm that a presidential election does. But get this, these numbers surpass the early numbers of the presidential election of 2008, which gave us President Barack Obama. 292,000 people early voted in Louisiana in that election, and that was a record year in its own right. John Couvion with JMC Analytics and Polling says both Republicans and Democrats have found something in this election cycle that has motivated them to early vote.
The Republicans got off to a strong start on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Then, literally like the flicking of a switch, on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, the Democrats had strong early voting, not only in terms of their percentages, but in terms of raw numbers. And so what ended up starting off as a strong Republican early vote basically now is neutral, where it's not too strongly Democratic or too strongly Republican.
Now, total turnout, that's both early voting and election day voting, is expected to be about 35%, which probably won't beat any records of note, but it certainly beats expectations for this kind of non-presidential ballot. Speaking of elections, a two-day event on LSU's campus this past week took a look at voter behavior. Scholars from the LSU family of campuses, Southern University, elected officials, and community leaders took part in Behind the Ballot, a nonpartisan student event that explored the trends driving modern elections. Panels discussed a range of topics such as a history of voting rights for the disenfranchised, creative campaign designs, political polls, and, of course, the forecasting of election victories.
I think it's really important for students, faculty, and the community at large in Baton Rouge and Louisiana to engage on a number of levels, looking at voter history, voter access issues, voting rights, fake news, some of the other issues that have come into our election in terms of foreign intervention, foreign disruption in our elections, all of those kinds of things.
Now, if you missed it or you're interested in hearing more about what was discussed at the seminar, you can head to our website, beourproud.com. The midterm election is just a couple of days away, and pollsters are working to figure out which party has the edge. Mike Henderson, the director of the LSU Manship School of Communications Public Research Lab, spoke at the Press Club of Baton Rouge last Monday. And the topic of discussion, the power of balance in Congress. Now, Republicans hold a thin majority, but that could change if the Cook Political Report LSU Manship Midterms poll is accurate. It indicates Democrats running could win over the battleground districts.
The Democrats have an advantage. We can say that. Can we say how big that advantage is or how likely it is to translate into a certain number of seats? No. And I think this is what a lot of the conversation, not just about this poll per se, but about the midterms, has lost. And frankly, it's an issue that's happened in 2016, in 2014, in 2012, happens all the time. It's an underappreciation for uncertainty.
Lots of uncertainty for sure. Other polls suggest that the U.S. Senate is a different story, and Republicans could maintain control of that chamber. Coming up next, candidates aren't the only thing you'll see on the ballot on Tuesday. Voters will also be deciding on 6 amendments. We're arming you with an easy-to-understand guide before you get in that voting booth. That's next on your local election headquarters.
This is your local election headquarters.
Well, to change the state's constitution, that has to go through you, the voter. So come November 6th, when you go into the voting booth to vote for your favorite candidate, you'll also be faced with 6 amendments. Now, those can be confusing, even for the most seasoned political pundit. If you're not prepared, you might not know exactly what you're voting on. That's why we've invited Robert Scott with the Public Affairs Research Council. You guys have done some excellent research with these amendments. He's coming here to explain them to us. Thanks for coming on the show, Robert.
It's good to be here. Our whole purpose is to give you a guide to let you decide how you want to vote on these, but most importantly, please read it or please get prepared before you go into that voting booth, because if you go in there and see those 6 constitutional amendments and are reading that ballot item and you're not ready, you're going to be a little confused.
Absolutely. It's a tremendous service you provide to the public. So we have about 5 minutes, but we have 6 amendments to go through.
Okay.
So we're going to explain it in the most simplest terms. Let's get started. Amendment number 1, prohibit felons from public office for 5 years after serving a sentence.
That's right. What amendment number 1 would do is it would say you have to wait 5 years after serving your sentence for a felony before you can run for public office or be appointed to a significant post in a public office. It used to be we had a 15-year gap. The state Supreme Court overturned that for technical reasons, and then we had no waiting period. Now this would establish a new waiting period of 5 years.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, amendment number 2. This amendment has probably received more media attention than all the other amendments combined. It's interesting. It would require a unanimous jury verdict in all felony cases.
That's right. You know, Fred, there are so many inconsequential constitutional amendments that we've had to look at over the years. This one is truly of consequence, and this is the type of subject matter that actually belongs in a constitution. So this is an important one you should really pay attention. Basically what this means is in Louisiana, you can have 10 out of 12 jurors for a verdict in a felony case. And what this would do is it would say you'd have to have a unanimous jury. That would put us alongside of all the other states except Oregon and the federal system. We've been an outlier in this, and that's one of the reasons that this has been brought.
Now, I know from hearing from some district attorneys throughout the state, some of them believe that the current system is more efficient, and they argue that they don't want justice to be hung up on 1 or 2 jurors who are holding out.
You can make an argument that it's a more efficient system to have 10 rather than 12. At the same time, you have a lot of district attorneys generally that have decided to support this.
I know Hill and Moore just signed on to
amendment. Yes, a local attorney here, district attorney here. And so I think you've seen a real change here. What's significant about this is you have the House and Senate both went along with it. You even had a senator, Senator Dan Claytor, who used to work in a district attorney's office, say, stop gaming the system. We need to do this right. He came out in favor of it. Then you had the Advocate newspaper do a great in-depth report on why this was a problem. And then you have groups on the left and the right of the political spectrum coming in and saying we need to fix this. It's a rather phenomenal coming together of chemistry to put this on the ballot and to try to make this work.
I saw it go through the legislature during the special session, and it got overwhelming support. Let's move on to amendment number 3. This is one that did make me scratch my head. Allow political subdivisions to exchange public equipment and personnel for authorized activities.
Yeah, Fred, you're allowed to have your head scratched on this one. What are we voting on? It's local governments, local government entities, parishes, municipalities, fire districts, whatever. They sometimes might want to share some personnel or equipment. And there's this thought in an abundance of caution, need to make sure we're constitutionally sound if 2 entities do that, because you're not supposed to give away government resources even to other governments. So that's what this is really all about. And you still have to have an agreement, but if you share something or loan something or give something and you're not getting the full fair compensation back for it, you can make an agreement and still do that under this constitutional amendment.
Okay, and amendment number 4, prohibit using money in the Transportation Trust Fund by state police for traffic control purposes. Is this the tax you pay at the gas pump? Is that where that goes?
Yeah, the tax you pay at the gas pump goes in the Transportation Trust Fund. It's used to build roads, highways, maintenance, help pay for DOTD, ports, etc. But it's also been used to help the state police with some of their expenses, particularly traffic control. But there's always a debate about how much more of that money they're using to sort of help support their more general operations. And what we've seen happen since 1990, when the Transportation Trust Fund was put into place, there's been at least $700 million that has been transferred over to state police through this. And basically, it got used for a number of years to help pay our routine operating costs. And that became an issue. A lot of people said we don't have trust in our gas tax anymore, that it's going to the right place. State police said, hey, this is a legitimate expense. Finally, it's come to this, where we'd actually change the Constitution, which allows state police to use Transportation Trust Fund money for traffic control purposes, and this would say no more.
Yeah, interesting. And I know that was an item of debate during the gubernatorial election, and I think
every single candidate said we need to put trust back into the trust fund.
Yeah, they did.
And in fact, we have not been doing this for the last few years. Under Governor Edwards and this legislature, we haven't been transferring that money over for this purpose.
This would make it official, though.
It would make it. It would make it constitutional.
You can't change the Constitution. It's hard to change the Constitution, and it should be, right?
It should be.
Yeah. Okay. Amendment number 5 allows special assessments for certain homes held in trust. What's that one about?
Well, some people have trusts where, like, they will want to continue to live in their home, but sign the value of that home over to a grandchild or
a
children,
trust.
or you set up a trust for it. And what this would do is it would say there are certain exemptions that are available for your homestead exemption and other ways of controlling your property taxes. And this would just say even if you're in trust, you still get that. Once you finally turn it over to whoever, then that's not valid anymore.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, Amendment number 6 would require a tax phase-in for primary homes when an assessment increases by more than 50%. That's another head scratcher, but I'm sure you have a good
well,
explanation.
I think the big head scratcher is where are people getting a 50% or more increase in their assessment, and that is apparently happening in some pockets, particularly in New Orleans, where you have these Airbnb phenomenon going on. And so basically what this would do is it would say if you're 50% or more in your assessment remains the same, but your tax collector, and in most cases the sheriff, is going to do a formula and phase in that increased tax over 4 years. So if you're 50% or more, under this amendment, you're going to get a phased-in impact of that. However, if you're 40%, you get the full phase-in impact over those first 4 years. So if your increase is 50%, you're going to pay less in tax over 4 years than if your increase is 40%.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like they need maybe do some more work on that.
It's up to the voters to decide that.
It is up to the voters, absolutely. So we've done great on time, but we don't have a whole lot left. There is one more thing you'll see on your ballot. This is parish by parish. It's technically not a statewide ballot initiative. Statewide parish ballot.
Fantasy sports.
That's contest. Right. Should it be permitted in the parish, your parish? So what's this one about?
This is the Louisiana Fantasy Sports Contest Act that was passed. And they're basically saying FanDuel, DraftKings, all of these games that you would play online or on your mobile devices where you're picking players or assembling your own team, whatnot, that type of gambling or betting or contest, as they like to call it. If you do that now in Louisiana and pay your fee and get your money, it's not supposed to be legal. But under the new law passed, they're trying to make it legal, and they're asking each parish to say, is it legal in your parish? As you as a resident of that parish, can you do it there? And that's really all you're voting on. Now, it's not taxed yet. Eventually, they'll come back and figure out a way to tax this. And who knows? They may come back, and you may get to vote again on whether you want to tax it or not. So we'll wait and see what happens with this. But basically, if you want to do fantasy sports betting online, then this is what you would vote for. If you're against gambling and you're especially its infiltration with young people, then you would vote against it.
Well, what's interesting is we could see this in some parishes and not in others, correct?
Well, that's right.
Yeah. All right. This is great information, and it's told to us in very simple terms. We appreciate you sharing it with us, Robert.
Thank you very much. Good to be on.
All right. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. Opioid addiction is a growing problem across the country and right here at home. But last week, President Trump signed a new law aimed at stemming the opioid crisis across the country. One of the key provisions is an effort to stop illegal drugs being shipped in from overseas through the mail. But our Drew Petrimo reports that effort faces major challenges.
Illegal fentanyl shipped through the mail is a major contributor to the epidemic of drug overdoses that killed 72,000 Americans last year.
In Ohio, the fentanyl, which is synthetic opioid, is the #1 killer.
An effort to crack down, Senator Rob Portman pushed for his bill known as the STOP Act to be included in a sweeping opioid law signed by the president last week. It requires packaging data be provided to customs agents in advance of all international shipments entering the U.S. by the year 2021. Tennessee Senator Lamar Alexander.
They send so many of this little white powder that's so dangerous that a small percent of it gets through.
The aim of the STOP Act is to give customs agents the ability to target high-risk packages for inspection. But some worry the new law could be difficult to enforce after the recent announcement the U.S. is withdrawing from an international shipping treaty known as the Universal Postal Union.
There are a number of countries that aren't even close to being able to provide that in the way that the U.S. wants and needs.
Kate Muth represents American shipping companies that oppose withdrawing from the UPU. She says the 150-year-old treaty is essential to providing information needed to stop illegal drug shipments. But the Trump administration says the UPU hurts U.S. manufacturers with high shipping costs compared to countries like China and Singapore. Supporters of the STOP Act hope for a compromise that allows information sharing while also balancing the cost of international shipping. In Washington, I'm Drew Petrimo.
Well, a liberal think tank says average Americans are paying for the tax cuts to the rich because projects like the infrastructure project the president pitched never happened. The Center for American Progress says Republicans prioritized tax cuts to corporations and the wealthiest Americans over fixing infrastructure. According to the Center for American Progress, 1 year of tax revenue from the top 1% of Americans in Iowa alone could pay to fix all roads and bridges in Cedar Rapids and Des Moines.
The tax cut for the top 1% in California was actually almost $5 million, which is almost 10 times what it would have cost to resurface all the roads in both of those metro areas.
Now, Congressman Jeff Denham represents a district in California that was analyzed. He says the report is flawed. He says the tax package is working and funds are being spent appropriately. As we mentioned earlier in the show, sports betting is a big business, and some Louisiana lawmakers want a piece of the pie. They are revisiting a push to allow it here after Mississippi casinos started winning big. Amber Smith explains how our neighbors to the east are cashing in.
Louisiana lawmakers are once again mulling over whether or not to roll the dice on sports gaming in the state. Speaking at a recent committee hearing, Louisiana Gaming Control Board Chairman Ronnie Jones says the underground world of sports betting exists whether the state likes it or not.
I don't know whether or not, you people want to push to authorize sports book next year, but people are doing it today.
And we collect no taxes on it.
It's absolutely not taxed here. And you're not guaranteed that you're going to get your winnings, from offshore.
Some lawmakers express concern that Louisiana is losing people to our neighbors to the east. Mississippi rolled out sports gaming in August. Just 2 months in, the Mississippi Gaming Commission says they've hit the jackpot.
We've got new traffic. Our September and August and September revenue numbers for this year were $23 million more than they were last year.
That was something Senator Danny Martini says he was trying to prevent when he proposed legislation to legalize sports gambling last year.
My goal was to compete with you, to stop you from taking all of our people and going over that.
But the legislation ultimately failed. Some lawmakers say they'll try to give it a go during the 2019 session.
I think a window into how Louisiana people feel about sportsbook is going to be revealed in 2 weeks when every parish votes on fantasy sports.
That was Amber Smith reporting. As for whether the efforts to legalize sports gaming in Louisiana will happen this upcoming session, Jones says he wouldn't bet on it. Up next, we'll have a look at the week ahead on your local election headquarters. Stay with us.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. For many people, getting to the polls on Election Day can be a problem, which is why Lyft is doing a special promotion this Tuesday. Citing a desire to help increase voter turnout, Lyft's The Ride to Vote campaign offers 50% off codes for rides this Election Day. For details and a link to access the code, just follow the link to this story on our website, and that is brproud.com. Go check it out. Well, This Week in Louisiana Politics is all about giving you a preview of what you can expect in the coming week. And taking a look at the schedule this week, well, Not a lot on it, but there is a very important date, November 6th. That is Election Day. Polls will be open all day and will bring you the election results, analysis, and live coverage of those candidates at their campaign watch parties right here on air and online. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics. I'm Fred Childers. I'll see you next Sunday right here on your local election headquarters.